In the small university town of Moscow, Idaho, a massacre of 4 college students in the middle of the night so horrific, the coroner is still processing what she saw.
The results of autopsies indicated that the 4 were stabbed multiple times and were likely asleep during the attack.
Charging the defendant, Mr. Kohlberger, with 4 counts, first-degree murder, in addition to felony burglary.
We come over here a lot and stuff, and it's just scary, you know, going out in public, not knowing who's around you and what they're capable of doing and stuff. You know, this guy looked like a typical person, you know, going to college and stuff, and turns out, you know, he did this horrendous crime.
It's November of 2022. In a small town in Idaho, the shocking news of 4 University of Idaho students murdered sent shockwaves across America. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, all students at the university, were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus residence.
We know that the autopsies confirmed the identity of the 4 victims, determined the cause and manner of death as homicide by stabbing, and determined that it was likely all 4 victims were asleep during the attack. Some of the victims had defensive wounds, and each victim was stabbed multiple times. There was no sign of sexual assault.
Police arrived at the scene nearly 8 hours after the attack, leaving the community in disbelief and fear. The case took a significant turn with the arrest of Brian Kohlberger, a student at Washington State University at the time.
Last night, in conjunction with the Pennsylvania State Police, Federal Bureau of Investigation, detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohlberger in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, on a warrant for murders of Ethan, Xana, Madison, and Kaylee.
Following his arrest, authorities conducted extensive searches of his apartment, office, and family home for evidence related to the crime. Some information has come to light through search warrants and police records, but the investigation is still mostly unknown because of a gag order.
This caught a lot of us by surprise who have been covering this case very, very closely, because there was already a strict gag order in place for the last several weeks or so that pretty much prevented both sides, the prosecution, the defense attorneys, and any law enforcement involved in the case from talking at all about the case. So we weren't getting very much information officially. Well, now the judge has signed off on a new gag order that takes that even farther, now including pretty much everyone involved, including attorneys representing the victims' families in the case.
Kohlberger was accused of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 burglary charge by a grand jury, bypassing the preliminary hearing process and escalating the case to the state's felony court level. The trial was scheduled to happen in October 2023, but Kohlberger gave up his right to a speedy trial, so it was delayed. Later, though, prosecutors asked that the hearing start in the summer of 2024. How did these terrible things happen? Court papers say that the killings are thought to have happened around 4 a.m. and that Kohlberger was involved in the crime after finding his DNA on a knife sheath at the scene.
I mean, you can imagine someone over these 2 victims, and then dramatically they drop the sheath down, they're still holding the knife, and then they go into attack. And it's such a frenzied event. They bolt out of the room, they leave the sheath behind.
It was found next to one of the victims, Madison Mogen. The sheath had a symbol of the U.S. Marine Corps on it. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, 2 of their roommates, were there during the attack, but were not hurt. According to Mortensen, she had a scary experience with the masked attacker when she saw him walk past her bedroom door several times during the night.
According to the police affidavit, when Dylan opens the door, she saw a man dressed in black with a black mask, and she says he has bushy eyebrows. Why was Dylan not killed? Again, there's no definitive answer. He didn't kill her because he didn't see her. He was sort of transfixed on getting out. He didn't kill her because he was satiated.
Or he was simply too depleted to kill again, says Fox. Even stabbing somebody for a minute and a half, not only is that overkill, but it actually would become rather exhausting.
Even though people were present for the events, they didn't call 911 until almost 8 hours later. Details about Kohberger's relationship with the victims have not been made public, but he lived close to them in Pullman, which is just across the state line from Idaho in Washington. At the time of their deaths, Goncalves and Mogen were both seniors at the University of Idaho. They were just about to graduate. Their lives were cut short in a senseless act of violence that still shocks people.
Maddie was a bright person. She had a bright smile. She had a bright future. Maddie was bright. She was bright in every way that a person could be. Maddie was the kind of person that made sure everyone felt welcomed and cared for. It was nearly impossible to not be smiling when you were around her. I am reminded every day to live like Kaylee would. Be more spontaneous, stop and take pictures, be loud, laugh loud, and love hard. May we all work hard to be more like Kaylee.
A grand jury charged Kohberger with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of theft.
Count 1 of the criminal complaint charges you with the felony offense of burglary. It alleges that the defendant, Brian C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did unlawfully enter a residence located at 1122 King Road, Moscow, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. The maximum penalty for that offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is not less than 1 year in prison, no more than 10 years in prison, and or a $50,000 fine or both. Do you understand?
Yes.
Count 2 alleges that you committed the felony offense of murder in the first degree. It alleges that the defendant, Brian C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogen, from which she died. The maximum penalty for this offense, if you were to plead guilty or be found guilty, is death or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
Count 3 alleges that you committed the felony offense of murder in the first degree. It alleges that the defendant
The case went straight to the state's felony court level without going through the preliminary hearing process when Kohberger declined the hearing in fear of deportation. The murders happened around 4 a.m. in November of 2022, and not long after the tragic event, the families of the students who died were given awards for their efforts. Mogen and Goncalves' families accepted their degrees in a moving ceremony. Kernodle's family was given her marketing certificate, and Chapin's parents received his award in sports, recreation, and management in the mail. People have also looked into Kohberger's past and what he did before the killings. He worked as a teaching assistant in criminal justice at Washington State University and was working on his PhD. He studied crime at DeSales University and worked as a security guard on the side before this. His interest in criminal behavior was clear from the study projects he worked on and the internship applications he sent to police departments. After Kohberger was arrested, evidence was found in his room that had stains that were thought to be blood. Also, the fact that his white Hyundai Elantra looked a lot like a car that had been seen near the murder scene made people suspicious.
So everyone's looking for this car, this white Elantra, and there's an officer, a campus police officer from Washington State University, across the state border, who decides to run a list of all the white Elantras on campus. And he finds one. It's registered to a guy named Brian Kohberger.
Kohberger changed the license plates on his car just a few days after the killings, which is more evidence of his guilt. Jason Labar, Kohberger's public defender, said that Kohberger could not help but be shocked by the accusations of committing 4 murders. Kohberger agreed to give up his right to an initial hearing to avoid deportation. His lawyer saw this as a step toward trying to get him released. However, there is a complicated story behind this first response that reveals more about Kohberger's life and personality. Childhood friends had different memories of him. Some remembered him as quiet and bookish, and others said he was bullied because of his weight.
He was definitely selectively quiet. I think once you got him going on something that he was interested in, it was very clear that that was where he would take the initiative and say, hey, here's how much I know about this thing.
Some people, though, had something different to say. They said that Kohberger was bullying people, though in a more subtle way. Casey Arntz went to high school with Kohberger and remembered times when he was mean to her brother, showing that he was prone to anger and outbursts. Even though Kohberger changed after he lost the weight he was bullied for, some stories suggest that he may have still been angry at the people who had hurt him in the past and did things to get back at them. An anonymous college classmate remembered how Kohberger often got into heated fights, often with female classmates, and often took the opposite side of the argument. Instances of alleged mansplaining and disagreements showed that even in academic situations, he can get very heated. The fact that Kohberger has psychology and criminal justice degrees just adds to the story. Kohberger had a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in criminal justice. This showed that he was very interested in learning how people act, especially when involved in crime. His research interests, such as his call for ex-convicts to take part in a study on how criminals make decisions, and his fascination with serial killers.
Prosecutors made a point in their probable cause affidavit. They went into detail about this Reddit post that the defendant allegedly made, calling out to criminals to provide him with the reason why they chose their victims and committed their crimes. Now, I understand he studies this stuff, but this is still a little strange.
Sounds like he's looking for the reasons why people do the things that they do. Maybe to answer the question for himself. Maybe to explain for him why he's motivated in the way that he is. Are you trying to figure out who you are, or are you trying to figure out who they are? And in this particular case, I think the prosecutors are going to say, yeah, this was about him trying to figure out who he is, because we can tell you who he is. He's this guy.
Did his fascination have more beneath the surface? Was this his attempt at satisfying his curiosity to kill?
It's not that unusual for sadistic killers to study criminology. We think of the BTK killer in Kansas, the Golden State killer in California. Both had criminology degrees, and the California killer did go on to become a law enforcement officer, and there have been quite a few others. So I think there are three reasons people study criminology. The first is because they're altruistic and they really want to make the world a safer place, so they have good motivations. The second reason is because they're absolutely fascinated by the criminal mind, which can be a fine reason, but the dark side of that is they're trying to figure themselves out. And the third reason is because they have a plan to commit crimes, and they're studying police tactics and procedures so that they can become a better criminal. And if Kohberger is the killer, I think those second two reasons would be at play.
Kohberger's interview for a position at the Pullman Police Department demonstrated his desire to work as a police officer as well. This shows his career goals and how his academic interests connect with real-world situations. Was he looking for help to cure him of his growing dark obsession? As detectives delved deeper into the tragic murders of 4 University of Idaho students, an increasing amount of evidence began to point more directly toward Brian Kohberger as the prime suspect. During forensic analysis, a very important piece of evidence was found. DNA connected Kohberger to the knife sheath that was left at the crime scene. Detectives discovered this sheath in the bed where Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves had died. The DNA found on the sheath was later matched to DNA evidence found in the trash at Kohberger's parents' house in Pennsylvania.
Trash ending up being key in the case. Police linking Kohberger to the murders by collecting his father's DNA from trash outside the family home and matching that to DNA they say they discovered on the button snap of a knife sheath that was on the bed next to the body of victim Madison Mogen.
Prosecutors confirmed that Kohberger's DNA matched the DNA found on the sheath, which made his link to the crime even stronger. It was clear what happened on the night of the killings once we look at the order in which things unfolded. Video surveillance caught a white sedan, referred to as Suspect Vehicle 1, leaving the area soon after the murders occurred.
Outside the house, police say the suspect's alleged movements played a big role in connecting him to the crime scene. On the day of the murders, a white sedan matching the suspect's vehicle was spotted in the area from 3:29 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. Court documents show the vehicle drove by the house 3 times at about 3:30 a.m. before leaving the road. Then at 4:04, the car returned to the street and parked. The car then leaves the street at a, quote, high rate of speed at about 4:20 a.m.
Hours later, the car and a phone that belonged to Kohberger were back at the scene. Kohberger was also seen near the victim's home several times before the night of the murders, mainly in the late evening and early morning, which was all discovered after a thorough analysis of his phone records. Kohberger's actions after his arrest raised more suspicion. He mostly kept quiet, but he showed signs of nervousness, mumbling to himself to calm down all throughout this stressful process. He didn't say anything directly about the case, but the way he casually commented that he felt terrible for the victims suggested that he had something more to do with the crime. It also seemed like he was trying to assure himself that he didn't commit the crime. But can we address the fact that Kohberger's contact with the victims before they were killed are also a red flag? When his social media behavior was analyzed, it was found that he followed Mogan, Goncalves, and another victim, Zana Kernadel, on Instagram.
You would go to Maddie's Instagram account and look at her pictures, and he liked them. Brian's name was under a lot of Maddie's pictures, like that picture, and that picture, and that picture, and that picture. So he was actively looking at the Instagram accounts.
And the importance of that is what?
Just digital evidence that this particular account had some type of connection with the victims.
Surprisingly, Kohberger had been directly messaging one of the victims just weeks before the murders, showing that he kept trying to get in touch even though he never got a reply. He also often went to a restaurant where 2 of the victims worked and was seen around the University of Idaho campus, which suggested that he knew the victims and was watching them.
There are some new details coming out tonight about alleged reports surrounding the Idaho murder suspect. Early this week, People magazine reported that Kohberger ate at a restaurant where 2 of the victims worked as waitresses. News Nation spoke with Steve Helling, a senior crime writer for People, yesterday. This is what he had to say.
You know, whether or not his paths crossed with the girls there and whether or not that's where it started, that's something that the cops would know for sure. But we know for sure that he ate there at least twice.
During searches of Kohberger's belongings, incriminating information was found, which made suspicions even stronger. A friend of one of the victims revealed that he used to have many photos of one of the female victims on his phone. Additionally, weapons, face masks, gloves, and other possibly incriminating evidence was taken from his parents' house, painting a disturbing picture of preparation and purpose. The case against Kohberger became more substantial as more and more evidence stacked against him. DNA evidence, surveillance video, cell phone records, social media interactions, and items that were seized all worked together to make a strong case that he committed the horrific crime. Prosecutors carefully built their case, and Kohberger's actions and relationships before, during, and after the murders made it more and more apparent that he was responsible. There was no question in anyone's mind that he played at least a part in the terrible events that happened in Idaho. Even with these new details, the ruling of whether Kohberger is innocent or guilty still stands. His confusing personal history, academic goals, and interactions with peers paint a scary picture of a man who is trying to deal with his past while facing accusations. More and more about Kohberger's personality and the events that led to the tragedy come to light as he waits to be tried. Internet opinions about his sentence are still swirling, ranging from a death sentence to life in prison, some defending the young man. Could Brian Kohberger not be guilty? If you ask me, who else could it be? But the victims' families and the state will have to wait. On Tuesday, March 12, 2024, Brian Kohberger, his defense, and the prosecution gathered for a pre-trial hearing. The defense requested to appeal the grand jury's indictment, with claims that Kohberger's guilt should be decided beyond a reasonable doubt. Currently, the indictment only provides probable cause that he committed the 4 murders and the burglary at the residence where the victims were slain. Unfortunately for Kohberger, the appeal was denied by the Idaho Supreme Court. The court has not set a new date for trial, though the defense is arguing for it to be delayed further to summer 2025. As we unravel the mysteries of true crime, your support drives us forward. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay with us as we delve into the darkest corners of true crime. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and keep chasing cases.